Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are connecting from. To introduce myself, I'm Shashidhar and I'm part of a Citrix Ready technical team. Today, we will talk about how Bitdefender helps in securing your virtual apps, desktops, and hypervisors, basically, overall, the entire network. We are joined by Andrea Kazaku, Senior Product Marketing Manager, and Andre Florescu, Senior Solution Architect from Bitdefender, and Chris Edward, Senior Product Marketing Manager from Citrix. We will talk about in detail how to secure the environment using the Bitdefender throughout this webinar. So I would like to thank everyone for attending this webinar today, and I would like to welcome you all to this Citrix Ready Technical webinar series, wherein we showcase how Citrix and our partners have integrated to deliver valuable products and solutions to common problems faced by our customers today. So, to speak about Citrix Ready program, it's an end-to-end technology partner program which showcases and recommends third-party products, solutions, and services that demonstrate compatibility with the Citrix products. It becomes very easy for the customers where they can quickly find solutions recommended by Citrix in the Citrix Ready marketplace by navigating to citrixready.citrix.com. For more information on the Citrix Ready program, you can navigate to citrix.com/partner programs/Citrix Ready. So before we start the presentation, I would like to mention if you have any questions during the webinar, please use the question panel on the right hand side on the GoToWebinar window, and we will take your questions in the Q&A session at the end. We have a few poll questions as well during the webinar, so please answer those. So without any further delay, please welcome Chris. Chris.
All right, well, welcome everyone and thanks for joining. This is Chris Edwards from Citrix. We're excited to talk about hypervisor introspection. This is a security solution that's sold by Bitdefender that works exclusively with Citrix Zen Server. So we'll give you an overview of the gap in the security industry that HVI fills, and then an overview of the solution followed by a demo, and we'll also tell the story of a customer running Zen Server with HVI in production. So we have a poll question that we want to start off with to see which hypervisors you guys are running in production. So we'll leave up the poll for about 20 to 30 seconds for you guys to go ahead and answer. So please take a moment to answer the question.
Yeah. So the question is, which hypervisors are you running? Zen Server, vSphere, Hyper-V, or other? Okay, I think we have received the responses. I'll give 5 more seconds and then we'll close this. Okay. So 71% are using Zen Server, 48% vSphere, 14% Hyper-V, and 5 are others. Over to you, Chris.
Awesome. All right, thanks everyone for answering. So to kick things off, maybe some of you are familiar with this image. This is the map of how WannaCry spread all over the world to more than 70 countries and affected several large companies. Hopefully, you didn't experience this image. And this is the pop-up that you would have seen if you were infected with WannaCry, telling you that your files are encrypted and you have to pay in Bitcoin to decrypt them. So hypervisor introspection customers did not see this message. HVI was able to stop WannaCry day one without any updates needed. Now, to be clear, HVI is not an anti-ransomware solution. Actually, HVI stopped EternalBlue, which is the Windows kernel level exploit that hackers use to gain full remote privileges on the victim systems, where they were then able to spread ransomware like WannaCry. And actually, there was other ransomware spread using EternalBlue. WannaCry was just the most publicized, and HVI stopped them all by preventing EternalBlue, the underlying exploit. So what is hypervisor introspection? Sounds kind of fancy, right? So HVI is a revolutionary new security layer that defends against targeted attacks and advanced attacks through live memory introspection at the hypervisor level. So instead of chasing for malware, HVI detects in real-time attack techniques. And you'll see later why this is revolutionary. So the key thing to understand is that there's nothing else like this on the market. It truly is a new method and a new approach to protecting your systems. So we'll get more into explaining the solution, but first let's take a look at the problem. So why is security important? And I think we all get this point. There's some stats on the screen you can read for yourselves. Many security companies and analysts do their own studies to come up with their own numbers. And the bottom line is that breaches are very expensive. They go undetected for months, and hackers have a financial or espionage motive. The one stat I would like to point out is that 90% of breaches come from the web or email attachments. So keep that in mind for later in the presentation. Another thing to note is that these breaches even happen to very large companies. So companies that you would think and probably do have significant investments in security solutions, multiple layers of security, and yet are still breached. Large banks, healthcare providers, government entities have all had recent breaches. And when this happens, there's a huge financial impact on the business. We've seen this affect potential acquisitions. Companies get hit with fines. They're very embarrassing. Customers lose confidence. The brand reputation suffers. And even CEOs have stepped down over data breaches. So, and to be fair to these companies, identifying malware is a difficult problem. Traditional AV solutions, they typically scan for files to determine whether or not that file is malicious. And these AV solutions have added various types of intelligence into their solutions over time to look more for characteristics, but the general principle is the same. It's based on identify what is bad based on what I already know to be bad. And for some more bad news, like any good software company, hackers have a QA department. They test their malware against the latest AV definitions. And if their malware is detected, they change their code a bit in an attempt to confuse the solution. And the QA cycle continues until they've changed their malware enough to look sufficiently different than the known bad samples, so it will pass as an uninfected file, at which point the malware is ready to ship and be released into the wild. Additionally, it's estimated that there are over 130 million new variations of malware released every year. So that's around 400,000 new malware samples released every month. And this is why your AV definition needs constant updating daily and really hourly, because your AV is constantly trying to catch up to the hackers who are always one step ahead. So I'll hand it over to Andrea to talk more about the problem and introduce the solution.
Thanks, Chris. Hello, everyone. Now, it's not only the number of malware that increases, but actually the whole security landscape has shifted. And this is a representation of business threats today in terms of complexity and numbers. Now, most of the threats your businesses face today are common threats. They are developed quickly, thrown into the wild, usually to bring some form of financial benefits for their creator, and they hope to affect small organizations or end users who do not have a lot of security in place. The second are the more advanced attacks. They are significantly less in numbers, but with far greater impact. Now, their creators take time in building them, and they are typically built to target mid to large organizations and specific industries, such as financial or healthcare, for example, and they usually use some form of advanced memory level malware. And an excellent example here is the recent WannaCry wave. Now, the third are the most sophisticated threats in existence, the APTs. Now, these are usually built with one organization and one purpose in mind, and use custom-built tools and techniques. These target corporations, nations, government for political or business cyber espionage. And an excellent example here is the hack on the Democratic Party for the presidential elections in the US, or the similar one that took place in France. Now, while your endpoint security is incredibly effective in dealing with the basis of this pyramid that you see here, as well as helping your company meet compliance standards, it will be more and more challenging for it to protect against more complex custom-built attacks. And in 2016, it took an average of 5 months for a company to discover a breach, and more than 50% of the breach companies actually needed an external forensics team to help them discover the breach. Now, the key to why attacks succeed in data centers lies in how the virtualization stack is built. So I'm just going to take you quickly to the backstage of virtualization and security, and bear with me because this will give you a new understanding on how your infrastructure is actually breached. Now, we adopt virtualization for optimum use of our resources, and we expect great performance and easy management. Security solutions had to be adapted or rebuilt to fit this new architecture and these expectations. And so a new generation of security tools emerged. Now, these typically share what is known as a security virtual appliance. And this is an excellent tool which carries the heavy-duty scanning in the place of our VMs, which means we can finally have VMs secured without slowdowns and manage updates smarter and have a centralized security view. But what this new architecture also does is that it leaves some loopholes, some which advanced attackers have learned to use. And that is, to maintain great performance, security focuses mostly on file scanning. Now, files can be quickly sent off to the security virtual appliance in a way that the user does not notice the performance impact, but memory cannot. And programs would just start loading more slowly. So the security solutions in the virtualization layer offer limited memory protection. And this leaves your in-guest security agent vulnerable and opens the way for attackers to hide from your security solution or take it down. Now, how would this happen? And let's take a typical scenario. Most malware trying to penetrate your systems has less privileges than your security solution. This is how the operating system was built. And this allowed your endpoint to detect and to stop it. But unlike common malware, targeted attacks use an advanced piece of malware. This can be rootkits or kernel exploits that take advantage of this limited memory protection and manage to reach the more privileged area of the operating system. Now, once it has this level of privileges, it can cloak the infiltration on the system and even take down your security solution. And once this tool is installed, even advanced security solutions will have difficulties discovering them. And the attack will rely undetected for months on end, in which time it can exfiltrate data, steal funds, or affect your productivity. Now, the essence here is that security solutions are great in tackling common malware of file-based threats. However, in the face of sophisticated attacks, they hit a wall, and they often need to play a cat and mouse game with your attackers. And more to the point, in the case of an attack, endpoint security stack, which is the upper layer that you see on the screen here, like antivirus, anti-malware, application sandboxing, they are very effective in understanding the context of the attack because they reside on the device that is targeted. Now, the drawback is that by sharing the environment with the attacker, they are vulnerable to the attack and they can be taken down, just as we've shown you earlier. Now, on the other hand, network security is much safer from the attack because it has no agents on the targeted environment, but it does not have the complete visibility of the network traffic and has difficulty spotting the signs of an attack. So the obvious conclusion is that we need to somehow reach this middle ground, which has visibility into attacks while also staying protected from them. And that is the hypervisor. And although primarily a virtualization layer, hypervisors also have an untapped security potential. They see clean, unaltered information about the memory being used by each of your virtual machines. And unlike the endpoint security, they are also completely isolated from them. And now the great thing about approaching security from the hypervisor level is that it not only offers visibility and isolation from the threats at the same time, but that it actually brings a whole new level of detection, which allows us to tackle tackle even the most sophisticated threats from the top of that pyramid that we've seen earlier. And this is because the hypervisor acts as a lens on threats, as an excellent lens on threats. On the VM level, security solutions need to struggle with this blur of malware, of hundreds of millions of samples with different shapes, as Chris showed you, and increasingly more difficult to detect due to the staggering number and variety. Now, the good news is that all these malware all share the same set of tools or attack techniques at the memory level. So you can have 1,000 different threats targeting you in a year, but you will only have up to 20 attack techniques being visible at the memory level. And even better, you can detect a 0-day just as easily as you would with any other threat. And this is because no matter how skilled the attacker is at hiding its tracks at the endpoint level, his actions will immediately light up at the hypervisor level. Finally, unlike malware, attack techniques don't change, meaning that HVI does not need updates such as signature detection, heuristics, or even machine learning does. And this will give 100% from the beginning, no matter what threats it faces. So we kind of found the ideal security layer. It should be easy enough to build it, right? Well, actually, it wasn't. The solution was so difficult to make that it actually was deemed impossible to achieve by academia at its time, and it took a combined effort from 4 different companies, which extended for over 4 years to achieve it. CPU, RAM, and hypervisors are not built to hand off memory this way. So Intel, the Linux Foundation, and Citrix joined forces in providing this access. Now, Bitdefender also jumped in, on the other hand, to develop a technology capable of scanning raw memory at the hypervisor level, which is a singular task in itself because scanning raw memory is incredibly difficult to achieve. But finally, after 4 years, hypervisor introspection was announced this year at Citrix Synergy 2016, and it instantly won the award for Best New Technology. We had since organizations from all around the world, from small to large, jump in and try the solution. And at the time of its launch, hypervisor introspection was also proven to have stopped some of the highest profile attacks in the last years, as well as assist in catching today's high profile ransomware waves and stop them from spreading. First thing we did is that we tested HVI against the most prolific financial attack in recent years. Carbonac is an example. This was an attack active for 2 years in over 30 countries, reaching to losses of $1 billion. Swift was another more recent example. This was a single group which planned to steal 951 million, but managed to get away with only 81 million. Both of them are proven to be stopped by HVI. It will even catch some of the most prolific ransomware of 2017, and this approach is equally impressive because instead of detecting the actual ransomware, HVI detected the delivery method. This means that the ransomware didn't even make its way to the systems before the attack was actually stopped, let alone starting encrypting. And some examples here were WannaCry and Petya that affected hundreds of thousands of devices, and including some very big industry names that you've probably heard about, FedEx, Renault, and they even managed to stop the radiation monitoring system at the Chernobyl nuclear plant. And finally, but probably the most impressive, HVI has been tested against some of the most popular cyber espionage attempts in recent years. It can detect Wild Neutron, an attack that affected over 11 countries, including Apple, Microsoft, Facebook, and Twitter. And it was also proven to stop attacks associated with the recent democratic election hacks that took place in the US and in France with Macron's team. Now, without diving too much into how the solution works, here's what you should know. You'd first need a hypervisor running Zen Server 7. And for those of you that do not, don't worry, because Chris will share with you a trick with which you can benefit from hypervisor introspection even if you're using vSphere, Hyper-V, or something else. Now, hypervisor introspection runs in a security virtual appliance, and as we mentioned, it does not need any agents on the machine that it protects. So it remains fully isolated from them and instead monitors your machines directly from the hypervisor level through the API that Citrix designed especially for this. It's that simple. And thanks to this unique architectures, threats cannot hide from the security solution as they would do from others, nor reach to compromise it. It's important to say that HVI will even protect your native endpoint security solution from being taken down. And this brings us to the last point, to my last point. Should you drop your endpoint security if you want to switch to HVI? And the answer is no. Endpoint security is important for a large number of reasons. You still rely on it for the vast majority of common malware, many of which are file-based and which can still cause havoc if left unattended. Second is that endpoint security is vital for compliance, application control, device control. Many other native features in an endpoint security are still important for your company. And for this reason, you'll be pleased to know that hypervisor introspection works with your existing endpoint security, whatever that is, Symantec, Trend, McAfee, and any other security provider. Not only do they work hand in hand, as I mentioned earlier, it will even protect your endpoint security by being taken down by attackers. So it's a win-win. And before I hand it off to Andre for some action, here's a wrap-up of everything we talked so far. Now, a combination of endpoint security and hypervisor introspection will help you face everything from common threats to advanced ransomware waves and data breaches. Endpoint security will work on the endpoint level, continue looking for malware, depend on updates, and run based on an agent on each VM. And it will focus on file scanning, some basic memory scanning, and be very useful to you for compliance and everyday cyber threats. On the other hand, hypervisor introspection will work exclusively at the hypervisor level with your existing, with no interference into your existing security stack. It will look for attack techniques which all memory threats share and does not need any signature updates. It's fully agentless, only communicates with the hypervisor, and runs full memory scanning. It will make an excellent job of catching what eluded you so far, advanced attacks and APTs. And best of all, you do not need to rip and replace your existing security, just add it on top. Now, talking is nice, but seeing the product in action is the real deal. So I'll hand it off to Andre to give you a quick demo on the exploring the WannaCry and show you how HVI stopped it.
Thank you very much, Andra. Thanks, Chris. Hi, everyone. For the demo part, we're going to focus on the underlying scenario that we discussed in the WannaCry context. So earlier we mentioned WannaCry was one of the most prolific ransomware threats that surfaced this year. And the reason for which this particular incident was so big was WannaCry was the first wormified ransomware in history. What this means is the way the malware propagated in a customer's network was autonomous. Which really means once the malware was released, it had a built-in capability of identifying the vulnerability, a specific vulnerability in the Windows operating system's kernel, and use that vulnerability to propagate. The vulnerability in question is popularly called Eternal Blue, and the demo scenario I have prepared for you is based on that particular exploit. So, on the screen right now, on the left side, you are able to see my demo lab, which is running Zen server with the HVI security server deployed on top of it. And in this lab, I'm running multiple systems, but we're going to focus on the two systems running Windows 2008 R2, which are deployed as were delivered by Microsoft back in 2011. Which means vulnerable to the Eternal Blue exploit. Now, mind you, we're talking about a vulnerability that's been in the wild for a very long time, at least 6 years, based on this particular operating system release. Now, on the on the right side of the screen, you see this very interesting looking dark window. It's a PuTTY session connected to my attacker system. And in the attacker system, I'm running Kali Linux, which is a penetration testing Linux distribution geared towards attacking infrastructures, of course, for testing purposes. Now, within Kali Linux, I'm running Metasploit, which is essentially an exploit delivery platform, an exploit delivery framework. And I fully loaded the Eternal Blue exploit and pre-configured it to quickly attack the infrastructure. Now, in behind the scenes, AGVI has been configured, as we can see in the Bitdefender Gravity Zone Management Console. AGVI has been configured to protect just one of those two systems. And to make it intuitive, I flagged them as AGVI on and AGVI off. The numbers at the end represent the last group of numbers from the IP address. So notice right now, the remote target is set for the vulnerable system. The expectation is once I execute the exploit, as an attacker, I gain remote access to the target system. Now, mind you, this is a live demo and the exploit is not 100% reliable, which means when I execute it, 1 in 10 chances are the target system might behave adversely and it might require a reboot. But let's hope that's not going to happen for this example. So executing the exploit, from an attacker perspective, right now I just need to sit back, relax, and wait for the exploit to properly execute on the target system. It's going to retry a number of times. And in the end, I should receive remote access to the victim system. And we're going to explore together just how dangerous this type of compromise is for an organization. At the same time, it's very important to understand, all right, this is that unfortunate event I was talking about. Once in a while, when the exploit is running against the vulnerable system, the system crashes instead of providing remote access for the attacker. So right now, we're just going to wait for the system to reboot, and we're going to retry the exploit. With regards to the background conversation, the reason for which this particular exploit is extremely dangerous for an organization is the attacker just needs to identify a system that's exposing the Windows SMB service somewhere on the network or somewhere on the internet. The user or the administrator doesn't need to take any type of action whatsoever to help the attacker succeed. Meanwhile, the system has restarted, and I'm going to retry the exploit. So you're going to see the exploit doesn't require any type of administrative interaction or user interaction. And when the exploit is successful, we're going to see exactly the level of privilege we are granted through the exploitation. If any questions come to mind as we're walking through this, please log them in the GoToWebinar chat window. We're more than happy to answer at the end of the webinar. All right, let's see if right now the attacker is getting lucky, and if we can successfully compromise this vulnerable system. All right, this time the exploit worked. From an attacker perspective, right now I have remote control of the victim system, and when I check for the level of privilege I'm granted in this illegal remote session, I notice I'm running with the highest level of privilege on a Windows operating system, which is system. Now, from this perspective, what this really means is I have full control of the target system. I can see exactly in which process is my reverse shell running. And if we take a look at the process identifier, I notice Metasploit has injected the malicious payload in the printer spooler service, which is running as system on any Windows operating system. So from here on, as an attacker, I've only exploited something in memory. I did not touch the disk in any way. However, I can start exploring the contents of the file system on the remote system. I can fully list everything that's present there. And if my interest is just data exfiltration, I can quickly identify something that's of interest to me, and I can download it from the remote system. Again, without touching anything whatsoever on the file system. Now, if I want to further develop my attack and I want to maintain stealthiness, I can start uploading different types of backdoors, rootkits, just so I can fully infect the system and maintain persistence. For example, let's assume I just want to prove a point and upload the file in the Windows System 32 directory. Obviously, you need to be system to edit anything in that protected file system location. And let's take a look and see if my proof.txt is in fact present on the system. And sure enough, I've managed to properly upload this. So this was a very quick example of what may happen following an exploitation attempt and a successful exploitation attempt. Now, of course, in the scenario, in the WannaCry scenario, that threat was automated to leverage this particular vulnerability and deliver ransomware. That was the end game. That was not an attack designed to be stealthy. It was an attack designed to be as noisy as possible, because the end game is getting people to pay some sort of a ransom. All right, moving on to the protected system this time. Let me quickly change targets here. So let me target the protected system this time. Let's just clear the screen for better visibility. And I'm going to run the exploit again. Well, this time we're going to watch the exploit retry the exploitation attempt for about 5 times, and every single attempt is going to continue to fail. The reason behind this is, at the infrastructure level, at the Zen server level, we're now running the hypervisor introspection technology, a security technology that's looking and analyzing the memory activity of this target system live, looking for exploitation attempts. When such an attempt is identified, HVI will prevent the exploitation attempt before any type of malicious payload is being delivered, and it also maintains the system stability. Regardless of how many times I try to exploit this system, the system will remain stable and the exploitation attempts will continue to fail. And of course, every time an exploitation attempt is conducted, Gravity Zone is going to raise an event in the dashboard. So if we take a look at the virtual machines activity, HVI activity, we're going to see an exploitation attempt affecting the SRV net.sys driver, which is the Windows kernel subsystem responsible for the Windows SMB server. And we're going to notice the event description is saying HVI detected an attempt to override the data contained by a CPU register. So the analysis that we conduct at runtime goes very deep, looking for activity in memory, activity at the CPU level, looking for different data that might be altered in real time. And exploitation attempts are fully prevented. With every exploitation attempt, we're also offering a very good start for any forensics team that the enterprise organization has in case they want to engage, and most likely they want to engage, to start backtracking the event towards finding a vulnerability, an unknown vulnerability potentially at that time. With that being said, I will hand it over to Chris so he can continue speaking about other use cases part of the HVI product. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thanks, Andre. Very powerful demo. Actually, can you hand it back to Andra? She has my slides up.
Yep. Andra is the presenter now.
Perfect. So a lot of our Zen app and Zen desktop customers run their virtual app and desktop infrastructure on Zen server. Zen server enterprise version is a free entitlement to all Zen app and Zen desktop customers. And we like to think of Zen app and Zen desktop as a security solution by default. So by centralizing all of your apps and desktops in your data center, behind your controls and your security layers and providing access over an encrypted connection with dual-factor authentication. So that centralization gives you more control of your data and access controls, and make sure that your information isn't walking all over the world around on your endpoints. So, but if you think about it, in a virtual app and desktop scenario, this is where all of your users are accessing their data. This is where all of your user clicks are taking place, where they're opening email attachments, downloading files, and browsing the internet. So by running XenApp and Zen Desktop on Zen Server with HVI, you can deliver the most secure virtual app and virtual desktop platform to keep your data safe. And as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, 90% of breaches occur from web browsing and or email attachments. So attackers can use browsers and email clients as a first step to gain a foothold in your network, where they can then spread the attack and infect more machines. So we have a white paper on this secure browsing scenario, and we've actually done full presentations on the secure browsing solution with XenApp, NetScaler, Zen Server, and Bitdefender HVI. So just from a high level, this is where organizations lock down their endpoints from having access to the internet and delivers internet access through published web browsers from XenApp, hosted on Zen Server with HVI to provide the most secure web browsing experience. And then there's other things that you can do from the NetScaler side with network segmentation and smart access and NetScaler Secure Web Gateway, which in real time identifies websites that have been compromised. So if you're running another hypervisor and plan to continue to do so, you can always stand up a separate XenApp silo running Zen Server specifically to set up this secure browsing solution. So we talked about securing XenApp and Zen Desktop, and also setting up this secure browsing through XenApp, but really customers can add this additional layer of protection by running Zen Server with Bitdefender HVI for their entire infrastructure. And in a bit, Andrew will tell the story of a customer that is doing exactly that.
Thanks, Chris. So to round up today's story, we'd like to share 2 testimonies with you. Now, at the time of its launch in May 2017, IDC analysts Mark Child and Alexei Proskura also looked into the concept of hypervisor introspection, and they released a study acknowledging the potential of the solution and how timely it is in the context of the latest security events. And at the end of this study, they named hypervisor introspection a qualitative jump in securing our virtual environments and militated for its importance in the wake of advanced attacks. So you have this study available on idc.com and bitdefender.com if you want to read it fully and understand more details, the technicalities of the concept. And the second quote is the one that Chris mentioned, is one of our first customers, and it has a bit of a dramatic story behind. Now, Jeff Cater is the IT director of Kansas Development Financial Authority. Like any financial organization, they deal with a lot of sensitive data. Now, they had security in place, and they were constantly getting breached. And at one point, the issue was so bad that they got hit with ransomware 6 times in a 6 to 8 month period. Now, Jeff Cater avoided paying ransom and fund the attackers. So with each breach, he had to take 2 and 3 days to get the infrastructure back on its feet and suffered data loss each time. Now, when Jeff heard about Bitdefender, he had already evaluated 4 to 6 other security solutions. He heard about hypervisor introspection and he tested it, and he was actually one of the first to buy it. And since using hypervisor introspection, he experienced 0 ransomware infections. And the biggest test came when WannaCry hit, and this is his account. The day after WannaCry hit, I got an email from Bitdefender encouraging me to enjoy my weekend and assuring me that we are protected from day 0. And it immediately made me smile and gave me a feeling of reassurance. Now, Jeff did not get hit by WannaCry, nor the other advanced ransomware waves or advanced attacks that followed. And this institution is now safe from attacks. And by Jeff's own account, the time he dedicated to security administration dropped from 50% to just 10%. And for this, I'd like to thank you for your time with us today, and to hand it over to Chris to also wrap it up.
Thanks, Andra. So to recap, security threats, they're becoming more advanced and more sophisticated. And Bitdefender hypervisor introspection addresses a huge gap in security solutions to protect against targeted attacks and advanced attacks. There's nothing like it on the market in the way that it can detect and prevent attack techniques, which enables HVI to protect against zero-day attacks. So we have customers running Zen Server with HVI in production, and they're very happy with this additional layer of security that they can't get anywhere else. So like I said, you can use this to protect your Zen app and Zen desktop environments, or like KDFA, your entire infrastructure. So please visit citrix.com/Zen-server to request a trial, and visit bitdefender.com/HVI to request a demo. And now we will open it up for questions.
Okay. Thanks, guys. It was a wonderful presentation. Initially, I got scared looking at all these malwares and then the attacks that were happening. Good that we have Bitdefender who is taking care of it. Great. So we have a few questions from the audience here. The first one goes, if I'm already infected by a virus stealing information, will HVI stop this, or will it only stop the introduction of the virus?
I'll take this one. It really depends on what type of threat we're looking at. Essentially, in the scenario the question describes, I would trust we're looking at some sort of a rootkit type of infection, which is designed to provide stealthiness and persistence. In that case, yes, HVI would detect and prevent the persistence even after the system was compromised. The reason for that being, every time the operating system is loaded in memory, HVI looks at the way the operating system is loaded and makes sure certain, let's call them structures in the kernel, are not compromised from an integrity perspective. I hope that fully addresses the question.
Yeah, thanks, Andre. We have the next question. What is the load on the hypervisor running Bitdefender, like memory or CPU? Is it noticeable at the VM level?
The load itself is really of no concern. So the question is a bit open-ended, so I'm going to provide quite a few details on this. The load on the hypervisor itself means load in DOM0 in Zen Server. To have hypervisor introspection and direct inspect APIs working together, Bitdefender deploys a supplemental pack in DOM0. And the memory footprint of that component is really low. We're talking about 10 megs of memory in DOM0, which is pretty much negligible. On the overall resource consumption side, again, HVI is a truly agentless solution. You do not need to install anything on your virtual machines. So the only footprint the solution has is one additional virtual machine per Zen server, and the scaling of the security server for each hypervisor in the environment depends on the number of virtual machines and their workload profile. On average, let's say a security server will occupy 4 gigs of memory on each hypervisor and be granted with access to 4 vCPUs. That's the overall load of the solution from a hardware resource consumption perspective.
Thanks, Andre. So the next question is, does it work on hyperconverged infrastructures?
If they're running Zen Server, absolutely.
Okay.
Exactly, and actually Nutanix is running Zen Server, so for sure it works on Nutanix, and it works on a few others as well.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so the next question is, how is the licensing done?
The licensing, I'll take this one. The licensing is done on a physical CPU level. So we actually license the number of physical CPUs that are used to host hypervisor introspection. There is a small requirement here that the CPU needs to be up to 16 cores. Everything about that will be licensed as a different CPU, as 2 CPUs actually.
Okay.
Yeah, the bottom line in answering this question, just to make sure the message is loud and clear, HVI is an infrastructure level security service, and it's only natural for Bitdefender to license the infrastructure. We're not looking at the number of VMs you're protecting or the type of workloads you're protecting in your infrastructure. We are going to license the number of physical CPUs in your Zen servers, and HVI is going to protect any workload running in that infrastructure.
Okay, great.
Exactly.
So the next question follows. Isn't this like a VMware NSX? They also say it is agentless.
Actually, VMware NSX may not use visible agents, visible security agents, but it still uses some security drivers, which in essence have the same issue with actually running a full agent. So for NSX to work, it still needs some sort of security driver on each VM that it protects. And that security driver is equally vulnerable to a security agents in the face of advanced attacks, as we've shown earlier. So the only solution here is to have nothing, no connection, no direct connection between the security solution and the VM that it protects. And in this way, you will be completely isolated from the attacks. And currently, the only option available at the moment is the hypervisor introspection concept.
Yeah, and just to add something more on top of that, Andra, the entire agentless concept that's been around in the market for a number of years now. It's very important to differentiate between the technological approach and the marketing taglines. From a technology perspective, Bitdefender works with any type of environment, including the old vShield endpoint implementation or the newer NSX implementation. The difference is in the level of service from a security standpoint that the security solution is providing. And that's exactly the difference that Andra pointed out early in the conversation, where we discussed about what it means from a security service provider to be focused on maintaining performance versus improving the quality, the intrinsic quality of the security service. Agentless solutions that are available on the market, they're called agentless because the third party that integrates with that particular ecosystem does not need to install anything on the guest system. The guest system is already geared with the necessary in-guest components that handle the brokering between the virtual machine and the security service, which is network-based. HVI is running using an entirely different concept. While agentless solutions that were advertised on the market today are focused on the file system and file system alone, HVI is focused on memory and preventing advanced attacks. So in a way, the concepts are complementary to each other, exactly how HVI is complementary to any other security component that you have in your stack today. Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, thank you. That was very useful.
Yeah, thanks, guys. So we'll take up one last question before we wrap this webinar. So the question is, does Bitdefender Advanced Business Security support Zen Server 7? Or is it ready to use with Zen Server 7?
It is. It is. So the solution, the question was advanced business security. Okay, yeah, so this supports both Zen Server Server alongside other hypervisors too. So this is part of Bitdefender's endpoint security pack. It's not related to hypervisor introspection, and it supports both Zen Server, Hyper-V, vSphere. Basically it's hypervisor agnostic.
Okay. So so it supports Zen Server 7 as well, right?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Okay, great. So that said, we are about to conclude this webinar. Chris, Andre, Andra, anything specific or anything else you would like to call out before we close this webinar?
No, just thank you for the invitation and for everyone for their time today, and we hope this was useful and informative for everyone.
Yep. Thanks everyone for joining.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for joining this webinar. Have a wonderful day ahead.